Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the HR Leaders Podcast, the show where we explore the future of work with industry experts and HR executives in the world's leading global brands. Today, we have a very, very special guest on the show for you. We're joined by Devon Harris, who's a Winter Olympic athlete, original member of the Jamaican Olympic bobsled team, which competed in 1988 Calgary Olympics. He also competed in the 1992 and the 1998 Olympic Games. Devon is now an international motivational speaker in New York, and then joins working with corporates in a keynote speaker. He's sharing his message of how everyone can keep on pushing and working for their dreams. Welcome to the show, Devon. How are you?
Hey, Chris. Great to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
It's nice to see you again. You're now my wife and her family are like constantly asking me questions about when I'm going to see you again. So
you know how those Jamaicans are, man.
I do. They're like, when you speak to Devon next, I'm like, well, he's on the show this week, so you can tune in as well. But how are you? How have you been?
I've been well, we're obviously here in New York and across the world too. I know we're still in the midst of this crazy COVID pandemic and swirling around in a sea of uncertainty. And so, I'm doing what I advise people to do, which is to breathe and let go and really, I tell them, beginning with the end in mind, just kind of focus on what you want your world to look like at the end of this craziness.
Yeah. And that's why I'm so excited to have you on the show. One, because your journey and story and background is super fascinating. But two, for people that are listening, Devon's been working with organizations all over the world during this pandemic to kind of come in and do some virtual, speaking opportunities to their employees around the world to inspire them through these times. So, if you're an organization listening, definitely reach out to Devon during this time as well. And he's definitely someone I would recommend to come in and inspire your own people and employees all over the world. So
this is where I go.
Yeah, call me. Yeah. Well, I kind of already introduced you, man, but it's quite incredible. I think all of us grew up watching Cool Runnings and the movie. And it was interesting when we first spoke to realize that, most of the movie is completely not the reality of the journey. Yeah. And that's why I was interested to share the kind of the true story of Cool Runnings with everyone listening today. But let's start from the beginning. You grew up in quite a tough area of Kingston, Jamaica. Tell us kind of about your childhood and kind of the challenges you faced and how that sort of shaped you moving forward.
Yeah, well, you know what? As I said, let me go all the way back. I spent my early years with my grandmother in rural Jamaica, small parish called St. Elizabeth. And the thing about my grandmother, the thing I remember most is that she was this amazing storyteller. And the stories that I believe have had the greatest impact on me were the ones she told me about soldiers and the amazing things they could do and not get hurt. And that inspired me to want to be a soldier. But the most important thing about those stories, Chris, was that it inspired me to want to do things that other people thought was impossible or difficult at best. And so that just kind of stayed with me. So, I eventually went back to Kingston. I was born in Kingston, went back to Kingston to live with my dad, grew up in Olympic Gardens. And no, that's not where we raise our Olympians.
That was a coincidence, right?
Yeah. But, so Olympic Gardens was still is one of the toughest ghettos in the world. I describe it, impoverished, violent. And so that's kind of the environment I grew up in, but love school, love sports. Perhaps because I love to play more than anything else. But I did well in school as well because of, I guess, the competitive nature, and you did well in school. That effort was reinforced with praise. And on the sports field, I recognized that, hey, all that matters is what you had in your heart, what you could bring to the field of play. And I loved that. So I grew up playing football, or soccer, as my American friends would say. But in high school, I started running track, or athletics, as my British friends would say. But I was not a sprinter. I wasn't fast enough. Or maybe I could have developed into a pretty good sprinter, but I was impatient to win. And so I started running 800 and 1500 meters and just kind of fell in love with that and started dreaming about the Olympic Games. And one thing led to another. And here I am, a 3-time Olympian.
Wow. You just skipped a whole big bit there in the middle. One of the inspiring stories that you told me when we first spoke was when in your town where you lived, that you kind of climbed a lamppost, and at the top of the lamppost you could see the kind of nicer area where all the nice homes and houses, and it was a very interesting contrast to show that where you were, but you just climb up and you can see outside of that. That was
so I didn't actually climb the lamppost. That lamppost was right outside my gate, and when I was home, not in school, that was my hangout spot. I would just kind of lean on that lamppost, but I could just look up and I would see forest hills lined with big, beautiful mansions. And, it's such a stark contrast, man, from being surrounded by poverty. And you look around and there's nothing in your environment that would suggest that success is even possible, remotely possible. But then, literally, cast your eyes up onto the hills, and there you're seeing examples of tremendous success. And so I just kind of always would just stand there and dream. Mm-hmm. And the big dream back then, the one that really drove me the most was to become an army officer. And again, it's, as a kid in the middle of the ghetto, it seemed like a half a world away, but that's the thing that kept me focused in school. And I did, what I needed to do. And then I enlisted and ended up in the UK, right next to
you.
Not Sandhurst, my man, the Royal Military.
The Royal Military Academy.
Exactly. Say it full. Say it properly.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, so especially my American friends who are not familiar with Sandhurst, it's the British equivalent of West Point, the school of Winston Churchill, Field Marshal Montgomery, King Hussein of Jordan, Princes Harry and William, and yes, me.
So you're in the army now. Tell us about when you got the phone call, because for everyone listening, the story of Cool Runnings, the movie, is not how it happened. To tell everyone how you and your colleagues, your friends became, all of a sudden you're in the army. A few months later, you're competing in the Olympics in bobsled. Tell us how that happened. What did that look like?
So I enlisted in the army at the end of 1984 after high school, and did my training, went to Sandhurst. And so if you fast forward, it's the summer of 1987, and I remember this day so clearly. I'm 21 years old. I'm walking down to the officers' mess, and I'm having this really intense conversation with myself. I'm like, so what are you going to do with the rest of your life, man? You've achieved this big dream of being an army officer. Is this it? Is it done? And I go, oh yeah, the Olympics. I've always wanted to do that. And the Olympics were coming up in 1988 in Seoul, Korea. And so I started running in the mornings, trying to get fit, because I'm thinking maybe I could get fit enough to qualify to run 800 and 1500 meters at the Olympics. So every morning before reporting for duties, I'd go run. Run about that time, two Americans who lived in Jamaica saw a push cart. If you have seen the movie Cool Runnings, you remember Sanka racing this wooden cart down a winding mountain road. Two crazy guys going on the side of a hill in a cart, right? Looks like bobsledding, except for the ice. So these two Americans go, maybe we should start a Jamaican bobsled team. Once they discovered that a big part of the race is a start, you needed sprinters. Well, the guys on the summer team didn't want to do it, so they came to the army looking for athletes. And run about that time, I'm running every morning. I go run a cross-country race, and I finish 14th from 40, and they're like, oh my God, he's fit. So my colonel, Alan Douglas, told me that I should go to the team trials. It wasn't, it didn't ask if I had an interest. It wasn't a request.
You're going to Olympics.
He told me I'm going to the team trials.
The trials, yeah.
And I don't believe for a minute that he thought I was this amazing athlete and I, should go see where my potential should lead me. There's a philosophy in the army that says officers must always participate, right? And he had a bunch of enlisted men going to the team trials. And I think it's a really good lesson, across the board, that leaders must be involved, right? You shouldn't be standing on the sidelines just kind of watching, right? You have to show that you're competent as well. And you don't have to be the best. You just need to be your best. So I went to the team trials. I mean, in that moment, Chris, when he told me I'm going to the team trials, I knew I wanted to make the team. Before that, I was ambivalent at best. But once I was going to the team trials, and I'm not the kind of guy to go, well, yeah, I did go to the team trials. No, what's the point? I'm going there to make the team. Had no idea how I was going to make it because I didn't think I was fit enough. I just knew I had to make it. And, I went, and I think they liked my smile, and they selected me.
What did the trials look like, by the way? Because you're not doing any bobsledding, you're not doing you're not actually doing anything, like not anything, but you're not actually on a track or anything, right?
Right.
So
you're not doing any bobsled, you're not bobsledding, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
What you're testing is speed and explosive power. So you're sprinting 30, 60, 100 meters, 300 meters, standing broad jumps, throw a shot put between your legs. And like I said, I'm a middle distance runner, man. I don't run 30 meters. The only test that was really comfortable for me was a 300-meter run, because that's what I did for speed work. But I'm trying, man. I'm trying to, like, in my head, I'm trying to get there in that top 4. And then at the end of the day, there was this push test, they call it. It's basically a makeshift sled on wheels, and you had to push it. And I didn't know anything about bobsledding, but I knew if there was one test that had to be the most important one, it was this one. And I ended up with the 2 fastest pushes. I pushed faster than even the fastest sprinter that was there that day. So maybe it wasn't a smile, maybe it was a push.
Yeah, exactly. And how did you get there? So you obviously, the next step is you have to qualify, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, except that back in that, so let me back up. So we got selected, and I got an airline ticket maybe 2 weeks after the trials, and they said, hey, you're going bobsledding. And I turned up at the airport, see 3 other guys who I recognized from the team trials, 2 Army guys and 1 civilian. In 88, there were no stringent qualification processes. Because back then, warm weather countries did not compete in the Olympic Games, in the Winter Olympic Games, right? Only temperate climate countries. Only countries have been doing this for years. And here comes these Jamaicans, and we turn up and go, hey, what time are the Olympics? Oh, cool. Oh, we have enough time then.
Okay.
So, our team, the first time we were on ice, going on a real bobsled track, was in October of 1987. Remember, the Olympics are in February 88.
Mm-hmm.
So this is our foray, first time we're going on a bobsled track. And there was, the international body had some concerns about whether or not we could learn quickly enough, and they were actually trying to keep us out. But Prince Albert, the coolest prince I know, he's a bobsledder himself and was a member of the IOC, and he goes, hey, give the guys a chance. And so we ended up doing 1 race against some of the B teams from the major nations. That was, and then we went home for Christmas. Then we went back to Lake Placid, New York, and spent the month of January, and then we went to the Olympics. That is basically the sum total of our bobsled knowledge and experience heading into Calgary.
That's crazy. So, like, you arrive, you've never been in the bobsled before. It's freezing cold. What do what's the first experience in a bobsled? You just sit in it and go down? Like, how do you test? How do you go from no experience and then a few months later
to be at the Olympics? Well, first of all, you have to be Jamaican. No, so let me say this. Bobsledding in the cold is far more comfortable than living in the cold. Like when I was at Sandhurst training and living out in the field, right? So that was good preparation for me. But so my first bobsled run, for October 87, I am crawling in a sled behind a guy who had never driven one before.
Oh my God.
And I tell people all the time that I'm scared of speed and height, and because I joke around a lot, they think I'm kidding. No, I'm serious.
And you chose to do bobsled. Oh, you didn't really choose, I suppose.
Well, I've done other things too. I don't like. I have a screw missing, right? I just believe that you should do things that you're scared of, and it's not just a cliche. Do the things you fear, and the death of fear is certain.
Something you talk about, isn't it, with companies?
Yes, I live that. I live that. It's just like if there's a challenge and I fail to take it on, confront it head on. I feel like I'm letting myself down, and I'm building up the fear to a point where I never be able to get over it. But what I know is that when I practice taking on a fear in one part of my life, it allows me to take on the fear in other parts of my life as well. And that's true for all of us. So when you start in bobsledding, you start at the half mile, halfway point up. So I'm crawling in the sled behind this guy. He has never driven one before. Neither of us know what to expect. And I just resigned myself. I said, you know what? If I die, I die, but I'm going. And that's I tell people all the time that when you're trying to assess whether or not you should take on a risk, you have to, in my mind, you have to decide whether or not you can live with the results if it goes bad, or maybe die with it. Like I decided
that's an extreme version. Yeah.
You have to be willing to say, you know what? I'm going to start this business. And if I lose my principal, if I lose my house, I'll be okay. At least I tried. If you can't live with the results, then that's not the risk for you. You know, you as much as I guess drastic as it sounds, like I said, if I die, I die. Is just that's a thing I needed to push me over the edge, because there's no way I'm going to fly all the way from Jamaica to Canada and I'm on the bobsled team and not go bobsledding, right? So that's what I did, and it didn't mean that I wasn't scared. Still, I remember we did 3 runs that night. On the 3rd run, I was still scared to death, but I was hooked. I'm like,
so you just went down slowly, right? So the first time you just pushed you off.
Yeah, they're not.
I say slow, but not slow.
Yeah, but to be honest, you're probably going 30 miles an hour. It's not fast. This ain't real bobsledding, but it feels like you're flying, man. It really does. And it's all so relative. And as you kind of get accustomed to it, and as soon as you get accustomed to going from the half mile, they put you to the top. and it requires you to work through the fears again, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't know what to expect.
About you said can you live with what happens if you don't achieve it? The same goes for living with the regret of not trying it at all.
One of my fellow officers, he I guess his colonel maybe had suggested, gave him a choice as to whether or not he wanted to go to the bobsled team trials, and he never went. I didn't know this. We're in the officers club and he's talking about it, but I heard that tinge of regret in his voice, and so I went, and it was not a bed of roses, right? But I went through it, and so I tell people all the time, hey, going after your goals can be painful. Welcome to life. It's rather painful, or can be a painful experience, because change is always painful, but so is regret. And so you have to decide if you want to live with the pain of change or the pain of regret. And while you're trying to decide, regret, pain, or change, which one? Know this: the pain of change is temporary. The pain of regret is eternal. Like we went through, you and I went through the pain of learning how to bobsled. You went through the pain of starting your business. But that's over.
But you also learn, right? So next time,
exactly.
You're also learning how to do it.
If neither of us had done what we did, we'd be spending the rest of our lives wondering what if.
Yeah. Well, talking about kind of setbacks and kind of overcoming obstacles, when you debuted in 1998, you ended up crashing and not finishing, right? That must have been really tough.
Yeah, 1988, yes.
Sorry, 1988, yeah. Was that at the end? So that was kind of one of the scenes in the movie, right?
Yes. So the crash didn't happen as I saw in the movie. The boat didn't come loose. It was driver error. And I remember, in the moment that the sled flipped, I went, "Oh my God, we're over! How embarrassing!" Because, dude, this is happening in front of the entire world.
World, right? Exactly, the whole world.
And I talk to people all the time, about failure. That is failure. And I go, hey, but you know what? Failure isn't fatal. I mean, I have failed in front of the entire world.
Oh, literally.
Literally, right? Yeah. And I've lived to tell the tale, right? So if I can survive that failure, you can survive yours as well. But in the moment, and it doesn't mean that when you fail, you're going to feel happy. And we're not talking about Pollyanna here now, real life, right? We felt like crap. We felt that we had given credence to all the people who believed we didn't belong. But more importantly, we felt we had let down an entire nation. And it's a big thing to have on your shoulder. Like the hopes and dreams of a nation on your shoulder, especially a small nation that has been nourished on Olympic success.
Through athletics. Yeah.
And here comes these four fools. And then crash in front of the entire world. It was like, oh my God. And so I just remember trying to exit stage left, and it was so amazing. People started to cheer, and we love you. They're shouting. And one guy, as I was leading the pack off the track, reached over, shook my hand, I shook his, and I had to kind of shake every other hand. But we were still worried about going home. But we got home and people were so supportive. I mean, the government made stamps with our faces on it, man. That's how amazing it was. But what I've realized over the years, Chris, is, we failed. And I talk about this all the time, by the way, that success isn't always in the results that you earn. Yes, in sports, you either win or you lose, and those results are final. But I would argue that our foray into Calgary was tremendously successful, because we have to sometimes learn to look on the journey. What did he have to overcome? We went from seeing a bobsled for the first time in September of 87, going on a bobsled track for the first time in October of 87, to going to the Olympic Games and pushing the 7th fastest start time.
That's a success.
It is. And in the process, inspired so many lives around the world. And so sometimes we have to take a step back after that initial pain, that initial punch in the emotional solar plexus, and go, okay, what have I learned? What can I learn from this failure experience? And not beat ourselves up, because we're really good at doing that, beating ourselves up.
Yeah, we do it all the time, don't we? Because it's so easy to look at the negatives, but we don't kind of, like, again, I had this conversation with Shane, my co-founder, recently. I was like, we're so focused on the future and where we're going that we're not even celebrating the wins along the way.
Yeah.
We're not even taking time to, and this is not to brag, but like when we made our first million as a company, we didn't even know until a year later.
Yeah.
And that sounds crazy. So we were so focused on going there that we didn't even care about revenue. It was never about the money. The money, I kind of, for years I've listened to entrepreneurs talk about it, and I was like, surely you must have known that. But now I get it. Like, you're so focused on delivering value to your customers and delivering value to your audience that the money comes. That's never really the goal. But I did realize there needs to be somewhere along the way where we have to celebrate success to where we get there. Otherwise, it can become all-consuming. Otherwise, talk about I think a massive misconception, right, from the movie as well, was the stigmatism attached to how the other teams and the community treated you. So in the movie, all of the other teams and everyone are like, oh, what are these jokers doing here? And it was very, they're not supportive at all. There's some racial stereotypes that they played out of it as well. And you told me that was completely the opposite, wasn't it?
Yeah, look, I guess Hollywood movies have to create this tension, all the time. But you know what? That was not my experience, man. Yeah, people have to understand. From my point of view, there were 3 things that was happening when we were in Calgary. 1, we were there to compete as hard as we could. 2, we're still learning. We were only in the sport for a few years, right? A few months. So, in fact, my friend from Australia has 2 pictures on his Facebook page that really illustrates what I'm talking about. Whenever we weren't getting ready to go down the track, we were watching other people. I was always at the start. And so he has a picture of me watching the Swiss team as they're getting ready to go and watching the Australian team. I watched everybody. I'm trying to learn. And then, so I'm trying to compete. I'm trying to learn. And the other part was that I was a little bit in awe in that this was the first time I'm seeing any of the major players in our sport. This was our first major competition. So I'm just like, oh, so that's Wolfgang Hoppe. It's like you go to the World Cup soccer, and you're seeing Ronaldo and all
That's
those.
like seeing your Ronaldo in a bobsled.
Yeah, but what I remember, one of my moments of just kind of sitting there with my mouth wide open, absorbing the atmosphere. The guy who was the best driver in the world at the time, Wolfgang Hoppe from the former East Germany, he took a pause. He paused from his preparations, smiled, and handed me an Olympic pin. And to me, that meant, hey, welcome to the Brotherhood of Bobsledding, man. It's good to have you. I think anyone who's been in sports knows that athletes don't generally treat each other poorly or others poorly. Yeah, there may be a team that hates another team, and there's that rivalry. There may be an athlete that has a personal issue with another athlete, but generally, we understand the work and the effort that needs to go into to get to the Olympics, albeit for us only 4 months. But you also have to remember that, hey, the Olympic Games are the most important event in 4 years. That's the most important race in 4 years. People aren't going to waste their energy worrying about a bunch of Americans who they're like, you know what, at least we're going to beat them. Let me worry about the East Germans.
It's that mutual respect that you command, right? Because anyone who's willing to put the work in and do the training, go down the bobsled track in the first place, that commands respect, right?
Yeah, completely. So was there maybe a sense that maybe these guys aren't serious because we brought a level of media attention to the sport that never existed before? So here it is that we started a few months before the Olympics, and now we are the stars of the sport. So perhaps, kind of as a sidebar, people felt that we weren't serious, but they definitely showed tremendous respect after that crash when we turned up again the following season. They're for real.
Yeah, because no one would have been surprised if you walked away at that point. They're like, they probably expected you maybe to walk away at that point, but then for you guys, like you went back multiple years. You didn't win a medal. What kept you going back? That constant chase, or really was it you just?
Yeah, the desire to win a medal, the desire to demonstrate that we can be just as good as anybody else, and the fact that we're from Jamaica had absolutely nothing to do with it. We never used that as an excuse at all. We felt that despite the fact that we're from a tropical island, that we could be competitive. So that kept us going.
Did any other tropical islands or compete?
Yeah, so after so in bobsledding itself, you have Puerto Rico, you have the U.S. Virgin Islands, you have Mexico, you have Trinidad and Tobago as well. And I can tell you stories about.
So you inspired a lot of other countries and
and then outside of bobsledding, you have had athletes from other sports and other nations. I mean, in Jamaica itself, we had a ski cross guy in Vancouver, and we have had a skeleton athlete now on a women's team, but you have had skiers from Ghana and Kenya and figure skaters from all over the world.
You inspired so many.
Yeah, from all these different, unusual countries, and then there's just been a dearth of Black athletes as well competing in the Olympic Games.
Yeah. So, do you have a female team?
We had a female team that competed in Sochi 2018, and a skeleton rider as well.
Okay, are they coming back for the next one, whenever that may?
Well, the skeleton guy, and I'm scheduled.
That's the craziest one of all time, right? You're just laying down on a.
I would never do that.
That's crazy. Like you're just, there's nothing protecting you. You're just going that. When I see a skeleton bob, like what's it called skeleton bob or
the skeleton?
The skeleton. Okay. Yeah. When you see the skeleton one, I can't even watch it. Because I'm like
lying on a lunch tray going down head first. I'm like, that's why they call it skeleton, because that's all that's left at the end of the run.
That's all that left. The other thing is as well that people aren't aware of is that you had to raise all of the money yourselves.
Or most of the money yourself. So George,
most of it, right?
the guy who came up with the idea. He was our main benefactor initially, but things got tight. He had the Black Monday and there was no money. And he actually gave us a choice. Hey, go back to Jamaica and wait until the funds come, or find a way to keep going. And I mean, it's one of those really important life lessons that I've taken with me, and I try to pass on to people. Hey, there's never a perfect time to go after your dreams, man. You just have to, I tell people, jump off the cliff and learn to fly on your way down.
Yeah.
Had we gone back to Jamaica, Chris, there would never have been a bobsled team, because the sponsorship didn't come to this day. Right? We stayed, and I remember one day, I mean, I'm 22 years old, a really cold day, really hard day of training. All I had enough money for dinner was one chicken leg, one roll, and a soda, a small soda. But that's what we did. We just stayed there and just plugged away. And then we created these shirts that we started selling, and that allowed us to get money to eat.
Yeah, and again, no one sees that. They see you on the on the ice. They see you you're an Olympian, but what they don't see is that you're training all day. You're working jobs as well at night, like you told me before. You're selling T-shirts and you're raising money on the phone. You're calling up sponsors, something you've never trained for.
Yeah,
to do. No one sees that side. They see they see where you are. They see that you're Olympian, but they don't see the fact that you have done everything. It does. The training's one thing, but you don't have the luxury like other countries who have a lot of funding to then kind of relax, recover, get your rest. Your evening is working and raising money and selling T-shirts and marketing and promotion, all of these things that no one saw.
Yeah, I mean, just being on the team exposed me to all of these different facets, right? And I look back at my life and I kind of smile. It's kind of remarkable. One day I'm standing at that lamppost and I'm dreaming about being in the army and possibly going to the Olympic Games. The next thing I'm on a bobsled team, and I'm hearing I'm listening to these conversations, sponsorship, corporate sponsorship, marketing, and those that sounded like Russian to me, man. I didn't have a clue what it meant and how all of this fit together. But as time went on, especially as I worked to qualify for my third Olympics in Nagano, I'm the guy, writing proposals and making phone calls and doing all of that stuff and coaching myself and while injured, but still finding a way to pull it off so I could get to the Olympic Games. So yeah. Tremendous.
I love your story let's transition to where we are now, because first and foremost, just congratulations for you and the team, and just like your resilience for getting where you are is truly inspiring. And that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on the show. Obviously, this is a HR podcast, but I feel like having someone like yourself on who brings that kind of richness of experience in the journey is so inspiring. And also how you translated that into the work that you do with organizations now, when you work with them. So let's talk about that. But before we do that, tell everyone about how you became a motivational speaker and how you found out about it, because that made me chuckle. But I just love the fact. Just tell it. I'm not going to talk.
Well, you're trying to make fun of me, man. What's going on here?
No, but you know what I mean. You know what I mean. And I'm not making fun of you. I think it's part of your character where you're like, I don't know, but I'm going to be the best at that. And for me, I absolutely love that. It was the same with the podcast. I said to my team, I said, when we start this company, I'm going to build the #1 HR podcast in the world. I didn't know how to do a podcast. I didn't know what it looked like. I didn't know how to get guests, but in my mind, I'd already made up it's going to happen. And you seems like you did something similar.
So, I moved to New York after the 92 Olympic Games, and I claim that I'm going to get back to real life because this bobsled thing isn't even real. And so I wanted to study hospitality management, but I could not shake this bobsled thing, man. So I started working my way back to it. And in the process, met a guy who wanted to be my agent. And I'd never had an agent before, so it kind of sounded cool. And he told me about this motivational speaking thing. I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounds good. But after the Olympics, turned out that was his only purpose in my life, to tell me about motivational speaking. He planted the seed. And I'm like, after the Olympics, I'm going to be a motivational speaker. Don't know what it looked like, but that's what I'm going to do.
You didn't even know what it was.
No, honestly, man. But it sounded good. So I'm working with some new guys. And one of them eventually became my agent. But even prior to that, I'm like, hey, after the Olympics, I'm going to become a motivational speaker. But my focus was on getting to the Olympic Games, and that in itself was a challenge, right? No funding at all. So I'm getting close though. I'm finding a way to make it happen. I'm in Park City, Utah, trying to qualify for the Olympics, because now, because of the 1988 team, it's a little bit harder to get into the Olympic Games. Those Jamaicans, they know how to mess things up, I tell you. So I'm there qualifying, and this guy comes to my room with a VHS tape, sticks this into the VCR, and he goes, "Can you do this?" And it was a Canadian Olympic ski racer called Vince Pacenti, and he's doing his thing. And I go, "Yeah, I could do that." So I go off to the Olympics, and I come back, and I started speaking, Rotary clubs and schools and wherever, and nobody booed. I'm like, wow. And in fact, people are like, wow, that was awesome. That was inspiring. And it just, yeah, you know how business goes. It grows from there. From there, yeah.
Yeah. But like, I think you're undervaluing again, it just part of your character of just saying, I don't know, but I'm going to do it and learn how to do it whilst I'm doing it. And for me, that's something I look for in talent when I'm employing talent, is looking at those opportunities where they didn't know how to do it, but they said yes and then learned how to do it. And that's kind of half of what we do here in our business. And some of our best innovations is like, we don't know how, but we'll start doing it and we'll learn along the journey, and we will just jump straight in the deep end.
Yeah, the thing that most people don't realize, Chris, is that apart from the mental piece, right, most of what you need to succeed is skill-based. Yeah. And what do we know about skills? There are things you learn. You practice them, you develop them. And it's true that at the outset, you may not be very good. In fact, you might suck. But as you work at it, you get better. And then next thing you know, you go from being really sucky to being elite. And I try to pass that on to companies that I work with.
Yeah. And it doesn't matter. That's what I found out playing ice hockey growing up, skateboarding, tennis. I was an athlete across multiple sports and quite high level. I realized that was completely transferable, whether it was sports or business. Understanding that I'm going to be terrible when I start, but it's the same way that I fell over on my ice skates every time I went on the ice. You get better, you learn, you invest in yourself, you become coachable the same way I was coachable on the ice. And I realized that was completely transferable. And that was like really empowering for me to understand that I can be good at anything. It doesn't matter if it's sports, business, sales, marketing, speaking, whatever that meant. And I think that's the block that people have, is understand. You have to understand that you're going to be terrible, and that's actually okay. And that's fine. And you'll get incrementally better along the way. It doesn't no one's just good at something straight away. It doesn't exist.
Welcome to being human. None of us were born with any skills. I mean, maybe, genetically we were given some advantages in terms of, but none of us knew how to walk or talk or any of that, right? Unlike animals, a horse is born and in minutes he can run. It took, I don't know how long it takes a human being to learn to walk, let alone run, right? But you learn to walk. And then some of us, then we eventually learn to run. And some of us learn to run so fast that eventually you become the fastest man or woman in the world. Is there some inherent talent in that? Yes. But the fact is that anybody can run. And what it is that it's a skill that you learn. And so if you can learn to run, you can learn to type. You can learn to do marketing. You can learn to do advertising. You can learn to do coding. You can learn anything that you really put your heart into.
Love it. When you work with organizations, what's the key messages or themes that you talk about, just for everyone listening? Because I love it. And there's so many companies I want to introduce you to, and give us a feel for kind of what the key themes and areas that you're focusing on right now.
Completely. So it's kind of interesting because most people come and say, keep on pushing, right? So that's like my tagline, keep on pushing. Obviously, it has a bobsled analogy, but it really applies to our world, personally, professionally, individually, collectively, as a group, as a company, organization. Because one, it is about overcoming the obstacles in our way. Like, I believe that every one of our goals and dreams, the visions that we have, right? Standing at that lamppost in Olympic Gardens, looking up on Forest Hills, it seems like a half a world away. And, you have this, it's sitting on this equivalent of the 650-pound bobsled, and you have to really push to get over the initial inertia to start building the momentum. But even as you get started on your journey, you still have to navigate the twists and turns of life, right? The challenges that all of us are going to face. And then there's this idea that to get to the next level, you have to continue growing, right? Continuous learning, always be learning. And then in that process, as you grow, I call that self-leadership, personal leadership. As you grow, as you develop your skills, as we were talking about earlier, you put yourself in a place to inspire the people and the organizations around you to grow as well. So I speak to companies along those lines about, having this amazing vision, overcoming the obstacles, diversity. Because interestingly enough, as most people will look at our team of 4 and not realize how diverse it was. And so I talk about the fact that diversity is just not about race or ethnic backgrounds and so on. Speak about leadership, of course, being a retired Army captain, commanded 120 officers and soldiers, and a Olympic team captain. I talk about that teamwork, developing a team and inspiring them and motivating them because we recognize that none of us can succeed by ourselves. We need others. Mm-hmm. I think, though, Chris, what separates me from, quite frankly, the average speaker is the tremendous effort I make to truly understand the challenges, the concerns that the company I'm speaking to, the team I'm speaking to, are experiencing, and then find ways to draw analogies from my experiences to theirs, so that it relates, right? It really connects. It's not a kind of speech that I'm delivering, but something that really speaks to what they're experiencing.
Amazing. Well, look, before we wrap up and let you go, if there's sort of one parting piece of message you want to give to everyone, what would that be? And then where can everyone check you out? If they want to work with you, follow you, where can they reach you?
Well, so I know that right now, as I started out at the beginning saying, we're in the middle of this pandemic, and I guess we're going into a second wave, and it's really hard to figure out when this thing will ever end. Will it ever end? Well, first of all, it will. This too shall pass. And although you're standing in a place where it feels so uncertain and you feel like there's no end in mind, I'm going to encourage you to keep on pushing, right? To keep on going, right? I used to sign my autographs in Calgary. I would say, keep on keeping on. So I'm going to encourage you to keep on keeping on and to kind of adapt the persona of an Olympic bobsled driver. When we're driving down the track and we invariably get in trouble, right? You miss where you're supposed to be on the corner. The tendency is to want to grab onto the controls and really manhandle the sled, force it to go where you want to go. And all that does is it compounds the problem, makes it 100 times worse. And so in those moments, for me, I feel like my eyes get bigger. I become really more focused, and I breathe into the moment, and I just kind of go with the flow, waiting to pick my spot when I know I can act decisively. And so I'm gonna, as counterintuitive as it sounds, I'm gonna really encourage people to, breathe into the moment, stay focused, have that vision in mind, and wait for that moment when you can act decisively. Don't do anything rash to make this whole thing worse. So I look forward to having those conversations with you. I can be easily found. My website is devonharris.com. Thought I'd make it easy. devonharris.com. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Twitter and Instagram. My handle is Keep On Pushing 88. So,
And your podcast.
and
What's
of
your
course, yeah, my podcast, Keep On Pushing TV. You can find us on YouTube at Keep On Pushing Always.
Amazing. Well, look, thanks so much. It's always a pleasure catching up with you. And also for everyone listening, you're in New York. Just so people didn't know, you're in New
Right.
York. So a lot of our listeners are in New York. So make sure you reach out to Devon, connect with him there as well. And for everyone on LinkedIn, thanks for tuning in, or Facebook, YouTube, wherever you are. Thank you for joining us. If you're new here, please hit that subscribe button. Follow us on any of your favorite podcast platforms. We're everywhere there. Apart from that, enjoy the rest of your day, Devon, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Keep on pushing until then.
Yeah, man, let's do that. Keep on pushing. I look forward to connecting again soon.
See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.